So nowadays, with everything that's going on in the economy, everything that's going on in the marketplace, there's absolutely a requirement, almost a requirement, to have a side hustle going on, some other way to make extra money. Now, one of the best things that you can do is learn to live within your means. But then once you've learned to live within your means and discipline and control your spending, time to grow your means, time to expand, time to set up a side hustle and get some extra money coming in. And in this video, I'm going to share with you 7 things that I found that are mistakes that people make in building and setting up their side hustles. And I'm going to share with you these 7 things. These are things that I've seen other people do, mistakes I've seen other people make. These are some of the mistakes I've made and things that I've learned over my course of having a business and being a business owner and building a business. And I think you're going to get a lot out of this. Make sure that you watch to the last one, because I'm going to share with you 7 things, 7 mistakes that people make. And the 7th one will kick your butt if you miss it. Let's get started. My name is Paris Clough, and this is Financial Self-Reliance. I absolutely love helping people manage, protect, and grow their money. In this video, I'm going to share with you ways to protect your money in your side hustle and the money that you make from your side hustle. The first thing that most people do when they start a side hustle is that they get an idea that they want to go out and make a bunch of money. And that's a fantastic way to start. So I'm going to share with you the first mistake that most people make is that they don't set up a business entity, or if they do set up a business entity more than what would be called a sole proprietorship, they don't get a separate bank account. So it's important to set up a business entity, keep it separate, keep your business bank account separate. And if you do that, you're going to be in a much better place going down the road. And we're going to get into some of the reasons why as we go through some of the other mistakes. Another big thing that a lot of people do when they start a side hustle or they see a side hustle that someone else is doing, they don't consider how much money it takes to actually run that side hustle. So what I mean by that is they don't consider the expenses. They only look at the income potential. For example, if you were going to be an Uber driver, you would look at what's potential. Oh, I can make $1,500 a month, or I can make $2,000 a month driving Uber. Well, what are the expenses involved with that? Like, you might make an extra $1,500, but you maybe spend an extra $500 or $600 in gas. Maybe you're driving a bunch more miles, so you have a lot more wear and tear. You're in the mechanic more often. So you've got to be aware of that. Now, those expenses, the good news is that you can track those expenses. And that's another huge mistake that a lot of people make, is they don't track their expenses. So make sure that you're tracking your expenses and making sure that you understand that a lot of those expenses, the reason why you want to track them is so that they can be deducted from your income when you do the taxes at tax time, which we're going to get into in a minute. So make sure that you're looking at the whole picture of your side hustle, not just what it could make, not just the potential, but also look at what it costs to run that business on a day-to-day basis or on a month-to-month basis. So tip number 3 is don't take on too much debt to start your business. For example, I know a lot of people out there, they'll get into a business and the business will say, well, fill your garage full of products or fill your storage unit full of products, and then you start selling those products, or go buy a bunch of stuff and flip it online. And those are great things to do, but don't get into debt too far for that kind of a situation. If you have a certain amount of debt that you can take on, or a certain amount of credit limit that you can use on your credit card, that is what credit cards were originally designed for, was capital to start businesses and help you really grow and expand your means and expand your income. But don't get overwhelmed, or don't get carried away, I should say. Don't get carried away with putting too much money on the credit cards, hoping that you're going to sell all this stuff, only to find out maybe that particular item or didn't sell as well as you thought. And now you have all this debt that you've got to take care of. So in the beginning, when you're first starting off, don't take on too much debt. Do yourself a favor. Don't take on too much debt no matter what you do. There is good debt when starting a business to raise capital and get things going, but make sure that you're doing it wisely so that you can return that dollar or turn that debt into income and into resources. All right, the 4th big mistake that a lot of people have is they don't have a goal with their side hustle. They say that I just want to make extra money. Well, what does that mean? How much extra money do you want to make? Do you want to make $500 a month, $1,000 a month? What do you want to make? Do you want to eventually have this side hustle replace your income so that you can do it full time? Have a goal. Begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey says in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If your goal is as simple as I just want to make an extra $500 a month to be able to save for my retirement, maybe it's to save for college for your kids, maybe it's to save up for a car, maybe it's to save up for a house. Whatever it is, have a goal in place already before you start that you can accomplish. And then the next mistake that a lot of people make is they don't develop a plan towards the accomplishment of that goal. So you might say, well, I need to make $500 this month. That's your goal. Well, what's the plan to do that? What are you going to do every day? What are you going to do throughout the week, throughout the month, to be able to make sure that you hit your goal? And if you don't hit your goal, what's your plan to make it up or make up the difference the next month? So it's important for you to realize that there's a lot of things that go into starting a side hustle. You can't just walk into some place and start up a side hustle, or just download a form online and apply for something and then you're off to the races. That's as easy as they want you to think it is, but there's a lot of things that you should take into consideration. I think this next mistake that a lot of people make is pretty big. but it's not as big as the last one that I'm going to share with you. So this one's pretty big, is that people don't set aside the time that's appropriate to be able to accomplish their goal and to be able to work their plans. So what I mean by that is that let's say that you want to make $500 a month. Well, at your job, you work 8 hours a day, let's say, and it's 40 hours a week, and you may be earning a couple $1,000s a month. Well, proportionately, it's going to take you about the same amount of hours. And especially in the beginning of a side hustle, you're probably going to have a lot of a learning curve. You're going to have a lot of things that you're going to need to do to set up things. So you're going to probably have to set aside a lot more time than you normally would have, or that you might have thought you needed to set aside. So one of the things I would highly recommend is that get realistic with the time that it's going to take for you to make this extra money with your side hustle, and then commit to doing it. For example, if you come home from work because you worked your 8-hour day, you're 9 to 5, that's what pays the bills, that's what puts food on the table and keeps the lights on. But your 5 to 9, from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. is when you build your dreams. That's when you build your side hustle. That's 4 hours a night potentially. And then you got dinner in there. And if you're married and you have kids and a family, you're going to have family time and all those other things. So you got to really commit to that time. You got to tell people, look, from 6 to 8, I'm working on my business, and you don't want to be interrupted during that time. That time is sacred for you to build your business. Now, if it's a side hustle, like, going out and shopping, for example, if you're a Shipt shopper, or if you're Instacart shopper, or if you're an Uber driver, or you're a Uber Eats delivery guy, that's pretty easy to set aside that time. You just get in your car and you go drive off and do it. However, other side hustles that don't maybe make that easy are going to require you to be strong and to be firm in the timeframes that you're going to allot to that particular business and creating that income. So it's very important that you set aside time every day where you can begin to establish a pattern and a habit to build that time and build that business. Now, before I give you the last tip or the last mistake that I see so many people make, this one actually is a killer. I promise you that if you miss this one, if you mess this one up, you're going to be in big trouble. You're going to be hurting big time. And you're going to wish that you had watched this video all the way to the end. Before I give you the last tip though, put a comment below and let me know, what kind of a side hustle are you looking at? What kinds of things have you had to do, or what things have you learned as you built your side hustle? Have these mistakes come up? Have you realized some of the same things that I had, that you should have a separate bank account, that you should have a business entity if you don't have a sole proprietorship? Sole proprietorships are really cool. They're really easy to get. You just need to get a fictitious business name in most states. If you're going to set up an LLC or a C Corp or some of those other things, not considering your expenses. I mean, have you started a side hustle where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was going to cost me this much to make this much money? And then any other things that you've learned as you've tried to build your side hustle, just put in the comments below. I'd love to hear and I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. All right. Now, one of the things that most people don't realize is that as they work for someone else, that other person or that business or that corporation that you work for has what's called an HR department or a payroll department. They either have an in-house payroll department, or they ship it off to a third party to do the payroll. And every time you get paid from your employer as a W-2 employee, you're going to see a few things on that pay stub. Some of it's Social Security, some of it's federal taxes, some of it's state taxes, some of it's what you're contributing, maybe if you have a 401k option, some of it's going to be insurance. There's just different things that are taken off of your paycheck every month automatically for you, but things that you don't have to worry about. You literally get gross pay at the top of the statement, and then they have all these deductions, and then you have net pay, and net pay is what you take home. It's kind of like hear no evil, see no evil, out of sight, out of mind, whatever. You don't know how much taxes you're paying with each time you get paid unless you look at the statement every time, because you just see the net deposited in your bank account. You see the net on the check. You just take it to the bank, and that's what you do all your bills with. Well, when you have a side hustle, you're the HR department. You're the payroll department. You're the one that's going to have to determine in the side hustle how much of that money that you just made is going to have to go to federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security taxes, and disability taxes, and any other situations that you're looking at, like maybe you want to set aside some money for retirement and other things. So if you made $1,000, you're going to have to set aside, you're going to have to know your tax brackets. You're going to have to know what your state and federal tax brackets are. You're going to have to set aside money for your Social Security, Medicare, and disability. You're going to have to set aside money for all these. So there's actually a self-employment tax. I don't know if you knew that, but there's a self-employment tax. The number one killer for most people to start a side hustle is the taxes. They don't set aside money for taxes. If you make $1, make sure you're setting aside 30 or 40 cents of that dollar in order to pay your taxes at the end of the year. The last thing you want to do, and I've had too many of my friends who built side hustles have this happen to them, where they get their taxes done, they have their employer already all taken out, they already know the employer did everything for them, but then they have so much money they made with their side hustle that they didn't save any money of that money for taxes. Sometimes the money you get back in your return from your employer will cover the taxes that you made in your self-employment or in your side hustle, but sometimes it won't, and then you have to write a check. And if you haven't set aside money for that, that's going to be a really bad day. In fact, this last year, thankfully, I set aside money. My accountant, when my CPA called me up, he's like, Paris, I got some bad news. I said, I have some good news and I have some bad news. And I said, what's the good news? He says, you made a lot more money last year than you did the year before. And then I said, well, what's the bad news? He says, you're going to have to pay a lot more taxes this year than you did last year. I hope you set aside money for it. And I told him, I said, you know what? I did actually set aside quite a bit of money for it. This is how much money I set aside. And actually my CPA let out a sigh of relief as I told him that I had saved enough money to be able to pay the IRS and what they had due to them. And so I promise you that if you set up a business and you get it set properly with the right business entity, get a good bank account, that you consider the expenses, that you don't get into a ton of debt, that you set a goal, that you write a plan, and that you dedicate time every day, dedicate time every week to your side hustle, you're going to build something that's going to be wonderful. And don't screw it up by not saving money for taxes, because Uncle Sam will come in and screw everything up for you if you don't do your part to make sure that you're proactively setting aside money with every time you get paid, whenever you do get paid, for those tax bills that are coming. And then make sure once you start making enough money, you're going to actually have to start paying quarterly taxes. So you don't get to wait till the end of the year. You have to start paying quarterly at some point. I hope these 7 tips helped you. These 7 mistakes helped you understand what to do to make your side hustle more effective and more efficient, to start your side hustle correctly and properly, and to continue to grow your side hustle so that it can be a blessing to your family, not a curse. I hope you got a lot out of this video. Please check the last video that I made here. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel up here and check out this video up here that YouTube thinks you might like. Until the next video, have a great day.